My name is Odette Rivera, and I started Avanza. And when I was thinking about doing this live conversation, I was super excited to think about someone that I admire a lot, Yuri. Yuriana and I met when I was volunteering at Mujeres Latinas en Acción, right? I was doing the domestic violence volunteering. Um, and Yuri, do you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Juliana Reyes. Domestic violence and sexual assault are like the core passion and the reason why I entered the field. I've been doing this since 2010. And as Odette mentioned, we met back in Mujeres Latinas en Acción, and I think we both have very fond memories of that. It was a great time, and we are, happy to continue on this mission of educating and hopefully, bringing more awareness, whether it's intimate partner violence, teen dating violence, domestic violence, all very much, still much work needs to be done.
Yes. So both of us have done a little bit of counseling, right? I mean, we met about 10 years ago, I want to say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. About 10 years ago.
What are you doing now, Yuri?
So in my current position, I am with City Colleges of Chicago, specifically at Harold Washington. I work as a clinical counselor at our wellness center, which is our counseling department for students. And I see students for counseling, free counseling. So that's always nice, very much needed. And we service students that come in with different reasons for coming to counseling. That is my current role now.
So we're going to start talking about teen dating violence. So February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And it's an issue that I'm very passionate about because we often see cases once the abuse, like domestic violence, but signs also when people are teenagers, and there's signs that we as parents and educators and caregivers can see, and then things that we can do. So we wanted to make this public for you guys. Judy, so what is teen dating violence?
Sure. So teen dating violence, similar to intimate partner violence, is when at least two people, right, in this case being teens, being anywhere from between the ages of 13 to 18 years old, are involved in a romantic and consensual relationship that exerts power and control, meaning that it's an unhealthy relationship that can either show forms of abuse, whether that is physical, emotional, or sexual. It can be only one category or multiple categories, but it doesn't take away the severity of teen dating violence and the effects of it.
And it can happen in all kinds of relationships, like sexual, pansexual, gay, lesbian. It happens across the board. It does not respect socioeconomic status. So with wealthy individuals and with individuals with not many resources, all cultures, all races. But I do want to mention that maybe some cultures keep it hidden a lot more than others because we are taught that things are to be kept private. Right?
Yeah, a lot of it's, anything romantic affiliation or anything that's personal shouldn't be publicized, right? So teen dating violence or dating violence, taking a similar tone in that, where it's it's in my relationship, my problem, I'll take care of it or I'll figure it out, as opposed to really it being this big issue that can potentially be illegal and have legal ramifications, but it's not necessarily looked at in that context.
Awesome. So, some interesting facts. About 1 out of 10 teen girls admit to have been physically abused or victimized in a relationship. 1 out of 10. And 1 out of 11 boys, teen boys. And 1 out of 3 teenagers admit of knowing a victim, a friend, someone of this around the same age that has been victimized by their partner.
Mhm.
So it's everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about it just like in a basic CPS classroom, right? If this is saying 1 out of 10 teens, 1 out of 11 males, that means that already three people, three girls in the classroom, three girls and three identified males in the classroom. So it's crazy. And I'm glad to see that. I'm not glad to see that these numbers are high, but I'm glad to see that there's representation in that. But honestly, just like any other statistics, especially in this form, we need to keep in mind that the only thing that can be counted as statistics are those that are reported. And I know that we just said that many go unreported, right? So in reality, these numbers are a lot higher. And I always like to make that distinction that if you find these numbers to be alarming, the reality is much more than that.
Exactly. Also, before we get deeper in the conversation, guys, feel free to type any questions, comments. Um, Even though only Yuri and I can be like visible to everyone, we want to keep you guys involved. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write them, to type them. And if you have any like examples or whatever, feel free to share them. But please make sure that you keep any information that can identify a victim confidential. So don't share any, like, no names, no schools or whatever, none of that. Just keep it general, right? We want to be respectful of people's experiences and privacy. So let's talk a little bit, Judy, about what are some of the negative effects of um, teen dating violence. Let's talk about the victim.
Sure. Yeah. Excellent question, Odette. So oftentimes we see this leading to like anxiety and depression, right? The victim thinking like the mindset that they're never enough or that they need to do better, basically that they're the problem, right? So that has to get like they have to get fixed. Oftentimes there's violence towards others, and not that the victim is a violent person, but because within their relationship they don't have any control. It's also just really displacement, right? That anger and that frustration built up towards their partner, lashing out at someone else that may really not have provoked anything, but it's more of that buildup. Often it can also unfortunately lead to suicidal ideation, again just with like the depression and the severity, and it often leads to thinking of I'm not enough, right? I am not worthy, my partner doesn't love me. So often thinking, if I'm not good enough for them, maybe I don't deserve to be here. So kind of like that logical thinking. Also, as far as like with coping, it can lead to like abuse. I'm sorry, to all substance abuse, drug use, alcohol use as a form to numb themselves, right? Whether like, you're a teen, you're in love, you want this relationship to work, and it can be it's really painful and excruciating pain when somebody tells you that everything's your fault, that nothing is working out because of you. So a way to escape that is resorting to substance use. There's often also pressures of engaging in unprotected sex, which could lead to teen pregnancy or STIs as well. Um, and also, it can create a pattern to, if and when they leave their current relationship, to later fall prey into another abusive relationship.
It's often what, um, connected to more. It's like a cycle.
Yes.
Even if that relationship, they can get into another abusive relationship. Um, Thank you for mentioning. You said violent toward others. So as parents, this is like a red flag. A sign. If maybe your child is very mild tempered and all of a sudden they're being rebellious, they show anger toward you, um, you see all that like change in mood, and you see that maybe it's after they started a romantic relationship, then keep really your antenna up, because that could be a sign. Not always, but it could be something that you might want to pay attention to, like the change of behavior and the change of mood. in your teen. Also, you're going to say.
You know what, and you mentioned something, just thinking back to what you said for parents, like to be alert with potential red flags, and just what we were discussing earlier, that a lot of times this is like hush hush kept under the rug, right? Is that culturally also a lot of times, whether it's like teens aren't allowed to date, or unless it's a formal serious relationship, especially in our culture, like don't bring that partner home unless it's someone that's serious, right? So also just I would really advocate for parents to be more involved and more aware of who they're dating, who their children are dating, to potentially be able to be more informed and see some of these red flags.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Sometimes we're like, oh no, 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 I don't want to see my child in a relationship. But once we let the friends and the boyfriends or the girlfriends or the partners in our home, I'm not saying give them complete like free to do everything they want. There's boundaries. There's healthy boundaries, but it allows you to see the relationship and have that conversation with them. I noticed that he kind of like shushed you when you were talking. What
Mm-hmm.
and to be very mindful of how you approach it, because if you panic, that might cause your child to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I noticed that this happened. What do you think about that? Or did you notice? Just open that conversation.
And I love the way you're phrasing this a little, because it's a conversation, right? So giving them the platform of like, hey, what's your thoughts? What are your opinions? Because that's exactly what they're being told in their relationship, that they are not smart enough to have or cannot have. So you as a parent creating that safe space and that confidence that, hey, what you say is worth my while and I want to listen to you.
Empowering,
Mhm.
empowering your. Um,
Exactly.
Talk a little bit about the characteristics of an abuser.
Sure. So, an abuser tends to be somebody that's very charismatic and like superficially, right, to others. But really, under that, they can have more of like an explosive temperament, tend to be more jealous. And again, because of this dynamic of always wanting to exert power and control, they can resort to humiliation, or what's known as gaslighting, which basically means that um, they play these manipulative games so that their partner could then question themselves, like, did I really say that? Did I really do this? Right? And I think we've all been in semi situations like that, where maybe we murmured something and we thought something else, and like, did I really do that? Like, oops. So in that constant mindset where the victim is walking on eggshells, right? Because their partner, the perpetrator, is constantly having these mood swings, and because they know that they do have this power over their partner, over the victim, knowing that they can get away with it. So being very possessive of the relationship, being very possessive of the person, and showing ownership, and maybe just even like really like bossy, like this isn't a partnership. Like I lead, you follow.
It's kind of objectifying the partner. We're not equals. Like, you belong to me. You're mine. That sense of possession, which can be easily wrapped in this romantic idea, right? Oh, you're mine because I love you. And it's like, no. And I know for a lot of people, even not just teens, but adults, it's like, oh, he puts me in this pedestal. And it's be put on a pedestal as a shiny, valuable object, because when you don't live to the person's expectations, you are like knock down that pedestal, and then that's when the violence erupts.
Mhm.
So this objectification, we have to be very careful, because, and we see it even in movies, media, how treating the partner like an object
Mhm.
is, it's hidden with like, or covered with romantic undertones. And
Yes. Oh my God, Odette, I'm so glad you bring this up. So January was Stalking Awareness Month, and I had an event at the school for students where it was specifically about how media romanticizes stalking, and it was meant towards like what's that movie called? 50 Shades of Grey, Twilight, like just different synopses of how. Um, Again, the perpetrator can be perceived as charismatic and being a good guy. Hence, these behaviors are more like romanticized versus being like that creepy guy that if that was the abuser, you can connect that. But oftentimes, that's not an accurate representation.
Right, right, right. I'm so excited. That's I just learned that January is Stalking Awareness Month. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for that info. So, Yuri mentioned earlier the words power and control, and that is kind of like the basis of abuse because that's what motivates the the abuse, the wanting power and control over the victim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's types of abuse. There's emotional abuse. Um, what else? Emotional.
Emotional, sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, and like even the form of stalking, you know? So one thing that I always clarified is that you could be in a relationship that is like, and I don't want to minimize like only emotional abuse, right? But that doesn't make it any less damaging than the others. And just because like, oh, it's only emotional sometimes, right? Or it can be all of the criterias that we just mentioned, physical, emotional, and sexual, or it can be just one and it doesn't make it any less severe. And I say that 'cause sometimes there's a misconception that unless like all the potential boxes are filled out, it's not abuse. And that's just simply not true.
And you just reminded me, there's a lot of times when I work with survivors, when I ask, have you been sexually abused? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, so you've never felt forced to have sex with your partner? They're like, yeah, but he was my husband or he was my boyfriend. And sexual abuse happens in romantic relationships. You know, if the victim does not want to engage in sexual relations and they feel forced or intimidated or I don't know, like they have to, that
Mm-hmm.
it's not
Right.
the ability to say no, having sex without wanting, even if it's your partner, your boyfriend, your husband, that's sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, I've had the exact same experience of it when, you know, and in that moment in that session, it's just kind of an eye opener or kind of like, let me think about this. You're kind of making sense, but I don't know. But yes, I, I, I've had that happen to me as well.
And you mentioned before about you mentioned teen pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's also a part of asserting that power and control. In a lot of teen dating relationships, we see pregnancy, and it's a way that the abuser, and again, the abuser can be male or female or pansexual or whatever, but pregnancy is used as a way to control the person. Okay, I'm gonna get pregnant, or I'm gonna get you pregnant, so I can down to me for the rest of your life.
Right.
That's having a child is a whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something real, and it's something, you know, when we talk about manipulation and coercion, like this is a prime example of that, right? Leading or tricking the victim into thinking that because they're like pregnant with their child or have children together, that no one else will want damaged goods. Nobody else is going to accept you with this responsibility. again, further entrapping that person in this relationship. So yes, it's very much a controlling piece.
And again, the objectification. You are now the mother or the father of my child. You are mine. You have that connection. We're connected. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about the strategies that maybe the abuser utilizes. Let's say for emotional abuse, you have humiliations, insults, gaslighting. If
Mm-hmm.
you have any questions or wants more explanation of what gaslighting is, please let us know. Any comments are welcome. Um, and playing mind games, right? Oh, I didn't say that. What do you mean? Like, I, you know, just and then he makes the victim doubt themselves and even think like, oh my God, am I going crazy or am I exaggerating? Right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Using social status. So, and this can be using hierarchies of power. So, socioeconomic status, gender, race. Um, Maybe if the abuser is older, age gives them power. Um, and even legal status.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If the victim is undocumented, the abuser, I've had clients share with me that the abuser said, well, I'm going to call immigration on your family if if you say anything, or if you leave me, I'll call immigration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it happens. It like they do follow up on their threat. So it certainly does happen. And oh gosh, what was I gonna say? Oh, I'm drawing a blank. Save me, Odette. I'm drawing.
That's okay. Well, they do follow up on their threats, but there are also systems and laws that protect victims.
Mm-hmm.
There's organizations, and at the end of our chat, we're going to share some names, and I will also make them public on the Avanza Instagram account. I'll put some resources for victims to look for help. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, they might follow up on their threats, but there are systems in place that can help the victim and protect the victim, even if the victim or the family is undocumented.
Mm, absolutely. And one of the other common threats, if you leave me, I will kill myself, right? If you leave me, I will take away the kids. And obviously that plays an even bigger role with, if the person is undocumented or if they are unemployed and potentially thinking that as the father that they may have more of a right to the children or something of that sort. But as you mentioned, that there are like agencies, lawyers, there's a reason why those institutions are here to protect the victim, and the perpetrator or the abuser doesn't want you to know that, because then you become empowered, right? Because then you know the resources, the help that's out there, and the potential for this new world, new opportunity versus what they want to limit you to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there are laws too. So there's the Violence Against Women's Act and
Mm-hmm.
the U visa. So depending on each scenario, there are laws that help the victim or the survivor protect themselves, right?
Yes, absolutely. And then domestic violence, which would fall under the umbrella of teen dating violence, in the state of Illinois. With the law, you are also entitled to like free counseling services. And as that mentioned, like those resources will be linked below.
So intimidation is another strategy that they use, and intimidation includes using like looks, intimidating looks, actions or gestures to provoke fear. And this is another thing that my clients have said. My clients have said, "Oh, he has never touched me, but he throws things or he punches the wall." Okay, or she punches the wall, or they punch the wall. Right? I want to be very inclusive here because sometimes we talk about the abuser as he. So they punch the wall, or they throw things, and those actions of like punching a wall or slamming doors. They are meant to cause fear and intimidate the survivor. So
Mm-hmm.
that's violence too. Um, Mistreating pets, right? Oh, they kicked my dog, or they grabbed the dog and threw it to the street. Okay, that is meant to cause fear, and therefore that's violence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Destroying the victim's or the survivor's property is another common one. Also, minimization, denying or accusing the victim of the abuse. So if the victim says, "Oh, you made me feel attacked, you made me feel scared," and they're like, "Oh, you're exaggerating. It was nothing."
Mm-hmm.
These are valid, and if you feel scared, then something happened that caused you to be scared. It's not you exaggerating or taking it out of proportion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things so that also comes to mind is like retaliation, right? Retaliation in the sense of like spreading rumors or like threatening their character, right? Especially when I think of like teens and everything being on their phone, right? Pictures, apps, messaging, where everything is just a screenshot away, right? And just thinking of nude pictures or maybe graphic text messages and the threat of I'm going to share this with people or I'm going to share this with classmates, which is illegal, but also like that also being very very common with this population.
And I know the victims feel shame for sending those notes or that content. It's not the victim's fault. When we have a partner, and I'm not promoting teenagers doing this, because there's also a factor of child pornography that plays into this. But it's our body. We should be able to do whatever we want with our body. We have that right. But once it's used against us, then that is the crime. Having, exposing someone's privacy that way. So as parents, I know that it will be very difficult to see like our child sending nudes or whatever. But just remember, when you react to this, they trusted this person. Yes, maybe they made a mistake, but it's not their fault that this information is being shared. It's the abuser's fault. It's their crime, not the victim's crime.
Yeah. And I think that's so important for parents to realize where the accountability is, right? Like we as adults struggle with that, let alone as teens. Like they're going to need so much more additional support to recognize that, right? Like where you did this in good faith or you trusted this person, but the other person is not being respectful of that boundary, of those circumstances, and whose fault this is really. I think accountability, appropriate accountability on the perpetrator or the abuser, is so important and oftentimes the reason why they get away with it.
Yeah. Um, Also, we see the abuser blame the victim for the incident. For example, yeah, I yelled, but you provoked me. You made me mad. You made this happen, and it's not true. He should be accountable for his actions. No matter, I always tell my clients, it's never the victim's fault. Even if the victim cheated, it doesn't excuse abuse. Because when you get cheated on, you can always end the relationship, walk away, and cut that relationship. But touching and hurting, it's not, it's not, it's not, no matter what provoked it. Quotations.
Exactly. Hmm.
So we talked about threaten to kill himself or themselves, threatening to call the authorities, to call immigration, threatening to kill the victim or hurt the victim, the family. That's another common strategy to use. Um, isolation. This is a common one.
Yeah, that is like super key as far as, wanting to, when we talk about that cycle, right? Wanting to like sweep the victim off their feet, to like gain that trust, that love and support. And little by little, little by little gain that power, gain that control. And oftentimes it's like a gradual process. And that's why people stay in relationships, because there's hope that something's going to change, right? It wasn't like this from the beginning. Like, I love this person. They're in love with the memory of the person that they started this relationship, which was fake, or maybe just a specific depiction of them, but it's not the actual whole person, right? So once they have the victim's trust, is you don't really need that friend. You don't really need that family member, right? Do your parents really have your best interest in heart, right? Um, don't you trust me? Right? And why do they want to do that? Again, to take away resources, to take away love and support of other people, and hence the abuser or the perpetrator being the grand one on the platform, as far as like, I am who you have to support, right? Like, no one else is going to be here for you the way that I am, even if that's not in a healthy manner. But again, the victim may not recognize that. And it's more so like, I have someone, versus it's good or bad, but there's someone.
It's a form of dismantling support systems, right?
Mhm.
And here it can also be very easily romanticized. It's it's us against everyone. Your family doesn't want us to be together. Your friends are jealous of our relationship. They don't, you know, so they vilify the people that care for the victim, family, friends, and they create this mirage of it's us against the world, and we're gonna fight for a relationship. And in that, in the way they vilify the systems of support, they're dismantling that, and before you know it, the victim is spending less time with friends, less time with family, and all of a sudden, the whole world of this person is the partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is exactly how teens feel, right? Teens feel like nobody understands them. Nobody has walked in their shoes before, let alone their parents or any adults. So it makes the connection with that person like even deeper.
And that's also that something that we see um, in media, right? All these movies where there's the villain who wants to destroy the relationship, or novelas. It's that there's that idea of it's us against the world fighting for a relationship, and you know, I often think about unhealthy relationships as like a roller coaster, and there is it's dangerous because we get a lot of like a dose of excitement. Oh, we're fighting, whatever, and then we make up, and it's nice. Um, but a healthy relationship is more like a lake, like a river, kind of ups and downs.
Liddy.
Yes, ups and downs, but not high highs, low lows.
Mhm.
I mean, you can go have a couple of highs and a couple of, but it's not this pattern of constant highs and lows. And those relationships can feel exciting, and that's a dangerous part about them. That sometimes we crave that adrenaline, but when that happens, go to
And
6.
yeah, and you know what? This can lead to like so many other topics, but it reminds me, and that I've seen you talk about this, where there's so much out there now that kind of makes light of being in a toxic relationship. And I mean, that's what you're talking about, like those like severe ups and downs, right? And kind of like normalizing it in an appropriate way, almost like humoring it. Um, which again, just thinking about being in a teen mindset, right? If like this is presented to me in social media, in TV, or in music, um, seeing it as passiveness and not like severity of it.
So this brings us to the cycle of violence. We often ask what keeps you in that relationship, and there is the abuser is not always bad. As people, there's some things that are good, and so in the cycle of violence, there is the tension stage where the victim is like, "Ah, I came out with friends. I talked to my friends. He or she, or they are gonna be mad." There's that, like, the victim already knows that there's something or potentially something that's gonna happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then comes the explosion. That's when the abuse happens, whether it's verbal, emotional, physical, psychological. There's this confrontation, the abuse happens. And then there's the reconciliation, um, where it's like, I promise, this is what I call the hook, because during the explosion, the the victim can be like, okay, I'm tired, that's it, I can't stand this anymore. But then comes the reconciliation, and that's the hook, where the promises happen, the I'm sorry's, the I love you, I'm gonna work on myself, I promise. Um, yeah, all the promises and the let's make this work and the romanticism. And then there's a honeymoon stage where it's like, okay, they're fine. And then again, the cycle, the tension building, the explosion, honeymoon, and it's very cyclical. And these stages can be very short or very long. So,
Mm-hmm.
it can be, you know, minutes from each other, or you can be in the honeymoon stage for 5 months, and then it happens again.
Right. Right, yeah. Yeah, I always like to specify that there's like no blueprint, right? It's not like a clear cut, like if this is your situation, you're in an abusive relationship, just because it can vary so much from person to person and relationship to relationship. But you're absolutely right that that those are like the key components of the relationship. And as horrific as like we may as horrific as the like perpetrator or the abuser sounds, right? Like, again, just keeping in mind that charming side, that romantic side, because there's, just thinking about us in our relationships, when we start meeting somebody new, we put our best face forward, right? And that's exactly what happens to teens as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about the possible signs of a victim. What what are some things that parents and caregivers, educators can look out for?
Yeah. If the victim appears to like fear like contradicting the partner, so again, kind of going back to not having their own space, their own personality, their own space to speak, kind of like very much in compliance, hence always doing like what the partner wants. And I look at it kind of like not having a voice for themselves. What do you want to do? Whatever you want to do. Or what are you going to do this weekend? Oh, I'm not sure yet. I need to, they may not say check in, but I need to see, right? So kind of like the decision making is always left up to someone else. Wanting to always please their partner, which I understand can be part of like a healthy relationship, right? You wanna like please your partner, but pleasing their partner while looking over their own needs, right? And not what they want, only what that partner wants or only what that partner will approve. And that can be, how they dress, how they act, how they socialize. If you see any changes in that, that's potentially a very big warning as far as like those changes in teens specifically. And one of the things that you mentioned, Odette, is talking to them, like kind of like wanting to like know their opinion and not coming out defensive or attacking the partner, because then they shut down, right? Again, they care for this person, they want to be with them, hence if the partner does something inappropriately, kind of like excusing their behavior or apologizing for them. What else? Oh, and one of the things, again, with teens is constantly being in communication with their partner. And nowadays, there's just so many ways of doing that, like following you on every social media platform, texting you, not even through a regular text app, texting you on Snapchat or whatever apps I'm not aware of, right, that are like private or filtered. And then even with like phones now, sharing your location, like does your partner really need to know where you're at all the time, especially as a teen? Is there a safety concern there, or is it the opposite, you know? If you notice a change in like school, whether they used to excel, whether they used to be in curricular activities, and that's no longer present, that can be a sign as well. I would go to I specifically would go to colleges and I would give this presentation when I was at Mujeres. And one of the things that I would like talk about is like, oh, if any hickeys, or if, your partner's in any like sports activity and like your the jacket or like the chain, which I understand that these things alone are not key of an abusive relationship. But again, it's a collaborative process, right? So if many things ring a bell or multiple things, like, all right, cute, he gave you like the cross from the gains or whatever. Um, but again, if it's to show ownership, or like that jacket has my name, so that means hands off, right? Like it's a very real thing that seems so innocent, but is not.
Mm-hmm. Same as the hickeys, like you said, not all the time, right? But it could be everybody else stay away from this person because they're my property. They're claimed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, I think less and less time with friends and family is another big one. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, I think you touched base on all of them. Have any questions, comments? Please feel free to comment. Um, so sometimes when a loved one comes to us and they share that they're in an abusive relationship, the first thing that a person who loves the victim says, just leave. And it's not that easy. There's a lot of barriers that make it very hard for a victim or survivor to leave. And love is one of them, right? I mean, they're in love with this person. Um, and with my clients, we often start working on self love. It's okay to love this person, but let's work on loving yourself so you can build boundaries. And once you work on that self love, you know, they kind of tend to say like, oh yeah, no, that's not right. That's not something I want for myself. So there's love. There's also they don't want to hurt this person, so there's fear that they might hurt this person. Um, they don't want to be told maybe just leave, just just leave them, right? Maybe that's why a lot of people don't come out and share their experiences with friends and family because they're not ready to hear just leave. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what, Oda, I think that that advice is like well intended, but it also just minimizes everything, right? Because if it was that easy, it probably would have already been done.
oh, it's very
Hmm.
difficult. I well, both of us were Latina, so I don't know if this is something that you experience in your family, Yuri. But I know that I see it in my family. I have seen it in my family, and I see it in a lot of other Latino families where if something happens, everybody knows because somos familia, right? We're family, and I have to share this with your aunts and your uncles and your grandma and your grandpa. So that really scares the victim about speaking up, right? Because we have to respect privacy, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, you want to
No, just adding to that, just because to your point on that if you're confiding in one person that you want help and you want to get out, it doesn't mean that you're ready to tell the world, right? Nor should you have to, right? Um, and especially because this is for teens, that's something for parents, educators, caretakers, everyone to be like really really consider it. You know, it's an adolescent stage where you're learning, you're developing, like you don't have a formed identity yet, right? Um, so there's there's shame, there's guilt. Um, being considerate of that. And you know, just like you mentioned in the beginning, Odette, like, hey, if there's anything confidential, please do not disclose because we want to protect everyone's privacy as because we have a right to that. And just because they're teens, it doesn't mean that there's no right to that.
They are also, they tend to be afraid of being judged.
Mm-hmm.
Often well-intentioned people say, "Oh, well, don't be stupid. Ay, qué mensa. Why are you with that person? Or qué menso, you know?" So let's not judge them. Abuse happens in a way that's very seductive. It's not right away. There is this, oh my God, this seduction of the person, and before they know it, abuse happens. Once there's already feelings for this person, it very rarely happens right away. You know,
Right.
it's very gradual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the first time you don't recognize it, you don't see it, or you let it slip, and over time it just increases, and unfortunately.
So how can parents and caregivers, educators prevent abusive relationships, Judy?
Ah, that is a mouthful of it. But I would say the key place to start there is honestly an open and honest conversation with your children. That is key. If you want your kids to confide in you, to trust in you, to talk to you, that door has to be open, right? And it's not going to be opened by them. It needs to be initiated by the adults. Be sensible, be sensitive. I understand that as parents, that doesn't mean like they make the decisions. The parent, you still need to be firm, and adolescents need you to be firm. They need consistency. They thrive on that. But also being sensitive and gentle at the same time, which I understand it's not an easy task, especially as a parent, as a caretaker. There's that fear that your child might be in danger, but also just reminding yourself that if you panic or if you say you can no longer date this person or take away their phone, there weren't always cell phones, and people were still date, they would still manage to see each other. There's many more ways now than back then. So although that might feel good in the moment, that will not be effective for your child. Believing them, taking them seriously, you know. And I think one of the things that I often, and maybe not necessarily in teens, but one of the things that I often hear is, well, what did you do? Well, what did you do to provoke? Like, especially like the first initial times, if it was something subtle. So again, that puts the blame back on the victim, and that's not what we want. Try to understand the love part, you know, try to understand what they see in this person and also the potential risks of them leaving this relationship. Again, it's not just break up with them and you're done. It's, well, I love them. Well, they have these pictures. Well, they said they would kill themselves, right? And even if this hasn't been this close to you, you know, this is part of this discussion. Like these are things that were probably said and done, so being aware of that and sensitive to them. Um, Talking to them about certain situations, certain scenarios, what to do. I am part of another panel for intimate partner violence, and you know we were talking about when one of my colleagues was in school, how she just didn't know where to go and what resources were available, right? So maybe the teen doesn't know, hey, you know, your partner shouldn't have the right to tell you you can't go there, right? Shouldn't have the right to tell you you're not allowed to wear this, right? Having those conversations with them. Let's see, giving them, oh, and highlighting what your child really does have, their values, their strengths. You know, again, because this is a power and control relationship, this leads to the victim being low self-esteem, very much depressed, and oftentimes not valuing themselves. So you as a parent, you like you're so smart, you're so this and this, like letting them know what their virtues are that perhaps they can't see for themselves right now. If you've seen a change in your kid and be like, you know what, just a few months ago, you were so involved with school and you were so active. You looked so happy. Like, are you happy now? Right? So, again, like letting them know that you've seen a change in them. Yeah. And that, again, that all stems from communication and being respectful and talking to them and upholding their privacy and I don't want to put any like false expectations out there that once this is done, it's all said and done. Because also this is ongoing, right? Just like their relationship is ongoing, your relationship with them is ongoing, their self-development, their identity is ongoing. So I understand that for adults, for parents, it's very difficult. But I cannot stress like trust, support, and communication enough.
Right. And it makes sense. And I totally get parents when they have these strong reactions. I mean, we don't want to know that our children are getting hurt, right? Because all the alarms go off and we want to go and
Mm-hmm.
burn it down. And, you know, unfortunately, with, especially with teenagers, sometimes when parents have these reactions, the teenagers like buckle down even more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's having conversations and empowering them of doing what's best for themselves. And I don't want to minimize the fact that it could be a very dangerous situation. In the most dangerous stage for a survivor is when they decide to live, to not to live, to leave, to leave
Mm-hmm.
the abuser. Again, there are organizations and police and laws and all these systems that can help the families and the victims protect themselves. There's also, and I will be releasing some information on this on the Avanza Instagram page. There's also safety plans. Okay, if you're gonna break up with this person, where are you gonna do it? Who has to be around? Can you do it via text? Make sure that he doesn't have access to your location services. Like how can you keep yourself or your child safe and help them keep themselves safe, because it is a dangerous situation and it makes sense that parents alarm system goes off because it is dangerous and scary. So
Yeah.
also I wanted to mention, as parents we have to also be mindful of the cycle of violence, because it often runs in families. So sometimes we tell our child, how come you got in this relationship, when maybe the child saw abuse and violence at home, right? Maybe the child doesn't know better and it's not their fault. They don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. And when you grow up around unhealthy relationships, we tend to follow those patterns, and even like healthy relationships can feel uncomfortable because the teen hasn't been around healthy relationships.
Right. It kind of goes back to that. I only know the saying in Spanish, kind of like mejor malo por conocido, right? Where if something is good, this feels foreign, this feels weird, I can't trust this. If I go this other route, I know what to expect and I can prepare for that.
Mhm. So we often, and I realize this working with teens and even adults, we often talk about, okay, what's an unhealthy relationship? and people know what an, well, not know, but we talk more about, okay, what's in a healthy relationship, but we don't talk about what's a healthy relationship, right? Um, so a healthy relationship is one where there's trust. They, in Spanish, they say tu media naranja, like your other half, or your, in English, we have like your other half or your better half. In a healthy relationship, it's not about halves, right? It's about I myself, you are yourself, and we share life together, but still being individuals, still respecting each other's individual like goals, friends, social lives, but we decide to walk in partnership, not enmeshed, but in partnership.
Mhm.
Um, there's healthy relationships have boundaries and respect boundaries. A healthy relationship is not one where there's no boundaries. There, a healthy relationship, there's, you know, you can feel free to tell your partner, hey, I don't like this, can you stop doing this, and the partner is going to respect that. um, there's no control, you know, over the other person. There's no sense of possessiveness over the other person. It respects differences. To be a couple, you don't have to be the same, right? You can be different and decide to walk the journey of life together. um, and also, I think that it's important to understand that a relationship can end and it's fine. I think that sometimes we can get caught up on the till death do us part, and then we realize that if something is not healthy, well, I made that commitment and I have to sacrifice myself because it's gonna be forever. um, and it promotes growth. You know, it allows the person to have personal goals and grow, whether it's in occupation, school, or however the person decides to. Anything that I missed, Judy?
Ah, I think you covered everything, but I just want to reemphasize what you just mentioned as far as like relationships ending. I work almost exclusively with adults now, and that is something that's difficult for adults to comprehend, right? Like kind of wanting to maintain your childhood friendships, wanting to maintain perhaps relationships that have been outgrown, right? But not knowing how to health how to end something in a healthy manner. And sometimes, and this isn't necessarily DV, but sometimes um, forcing something to work, then it leads to that toxicity. Then it can lead to those unhealthy patterns. So putting it that back onto teens, right? Like as a parent, I can understand why, you got in this relationship, or I can understand why it's so hard for you to leave. But is this relationship still serving what you want? Are they still meeting your needs? Or has it become a one-sided relationship? And that can be another way to tackle this.
And also, I want to be mindful that sometimes in relationships, one person's going to need more support than the other, but it's like a dance, and it's not always this leveled, right? It's not always the same person. It's okay to make sacrifices in a relationship because you love the person and because you want to support the person, but it's not always this dynamic of the same person always sacrificing themselves. You know, it's a dance. It flows. Um, So, um, really quickly, some resources. Like I said, I'll put something on the Instagram page. But there's the National Teen Dating Abuse Helpline. There is, and if you can think of any uh, more, Judy, there.
Uh, Yeah, so there's the National Teen Dating Abuse Hotline. Even for teens, they can also reach out to the Domestic Violence Hotline, the RAINT Network. I think for teens specifically, something like a Break the Cycle is really good for them, as far as like being an interactive tool for them. And like they even have like texting and things of that sort available. The Safe Space, Mujeres Latinas en Acción. Other than that, that's where we started. We're huge fans of them. Metropolitan Family Services. I can think of Abnagar as well.
There's a suicide prevention hotline, and I think that this one is even. I mean, I like talking to my kids about it. I like sharing the information. Even my clients, I'm like, save this number just in case if you ever need it, or if someone else in your life needs it, you have it handy. So, suicide prevention hotline is another one.
Yeah, and then even Friends and the agency Friends in St. Anthony have programs specifically for teens as well.
Guys, if you have any questions, please type. If not, I think we're getting ready to wrap up.
Well, this was a pleasure, Odette. This was so nice. I hope that everyone enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you. It's always fun talking to you, and I love the fact that we're both passionate about this topic. Thank you everybody for joining us. I will put also this video on Avanza's Instagram and the YouTube page